Welcome to the Stories from Communism podcast, where we share real stories of what it's actually like to live in socialism and communism. This podcast is created by Retalk, the non-woke social network. My next guest is actually my mum, Eszter Zaborszky. She grew up in Soviet Hungary and then she moved to the UK in the 90s. She shares many stories, including how her parents had to get married in secret because they wanted to have a religious Catholic wedding. She also tells stories about how someone tried to get her to inform on her colleagues and tried to coerce her to join the party in that way. But there's many, many other interesting stories. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Mum. Thank you for coming on this podcast and sharing your stories about what it's like in communism.
Well, thank you, Peter, for inviting me. And it's quite an interesting topic, I think, to talk about. What was life like at that time?
And maybe it's not talked about enough, perhaps.
No, not at all. Not at all. That was something, what life was like at that time, or what you did, was very much kind of a topic that you didn't share with anybody, with everybody. You had to be very careful with whom you talked about certain things. And even now, talking about that time, those times, when you first asked me, I thought, well, that's great, but it really kind of hit me that the old feeling of, is it wise? Is it good if I talk about those times? Can it be dangerous? Can it harm anybody? Because that was what had been kind of ingrained so much in everybody during those times, to be very, very careful, very vigilant what you say, how you say things, because you could lose your job, or your family member could lose a job, or you couldn't get into university. So there were kind of, not an easy. And this is probably people don't feel free to talk about it.
Yeah, it's amazing that 30 or 40 years on, people, you can still feel the same feelings that you did back then.
Yeah. And for me, I was a child. I lived my first 40 years in Hungary, most of the time in socialism with communist ideas. And, what your experience is in childhood, that stays with you for life. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe do you want to just go through your life, I guess, and what you initially lived obviously in Hungary and socialist Hungary, but your kind of life story in a short story.
Yeah. Well, I was born in 54, so kind of the 50s, a very difficult time, 50s, 60s, and my very first memory, childhood memory, that really kind of sticks with me, is a situation during the October event in 1956.
The revolution against
the revolution against the Soviets. And we lived in a block of flats on the top floor. And I remember my dad standing at the window, and my memory is that I was standing next to him down there. And he said, I can see a Soviet tank approaching. And I just remember this. And after that, we were taken down to the first floor to another apartment, another flat, where a friend lived. And we stayed there during those days because my parents were worried about, buildings were shot at. So being on the first floor was probably more secure than on the top. So that's my first memory of childhood.
And you were only 2 years old then?
I was 2.5. I was 2.5. Yeah.
It's quite a first memory.
Yes. Yeah. And because I was born in a family where both my parents both my parents' backgrounds were not in line with the socialist view or the communist ideas, because one of my grandfather was a lawyer in the Ministry of Justice, quite high ranked, and my other grandfather worked in the National Bank of Hungary, again relatively high up. And that was before the war. And both families were religious, Roman Catholic. So that gave a kind of a certain approach to the changing world. And so both were educated, but they lost everything when the Soviets took over. And but it was very important from both sides of the family to adhere to those values that they were bringing, which was keep the faith, work hard, be honest, stay honest, and they just didn't want to give in. And that came through my parents. My father was an economist, my mother was a teacher, but both of them were very kind of strong-minded about how they wanted to raise their children, which was according kind of the old ideas. They didn't agree with the changes, with the socialist views, the way kind of the country was run. And that for us, children, caused problems. It wasn't easy because the minute you start school, you go out into the world, and then you are made to realize that there is a huge difference between your home life, what's going on at home, and the outside world at school. Because obviously the school had to follow the rules of the new state. And I remember, and that's again something very often kind of we heard, we don't talk about it at school. We don't talk about it through the phone because your phone might have been tapped, especially if someone's relative emigrated to the West. Mm-hmm. Those family members remaining in Hungary may have been actually, their phones tapped and kind of monitored.
So do you actually you actually remember this from? Because it's amazing that as a child you already remember this, that there was this tension between what was at home and what you had to say publicly.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I don't know how it happened, but maybe because these sentences we heard so often at home. Don't talk about it at school. I can't remember what it was we were talking about at home, but we were told don't talk about it at home, and it sometimes caused confusion. And I remember an example when I was already kind of 10 years old, roughly, and it was geography lesson. And I was asked to go to the blackboard, and there was the map of Europe. And somehow the question was, what is the capital of Germany? So I said, is Bonn. And then the teacher said, no. And then I said, oh, yeah. The capital is Berlin until the two Germanys are united again. And then the teacher looked at me and said, okay, Eszter, go to your place. And nothing more was said about it, because obviously this showed, for someone learning and living in Hungary, in the socialist Hungary, East Germany was the Germany with Berlin the capital. And at that time, West Germany, the new capital was Bonn. So in my head, probably heard at home talking about it, I had this confusion. Now, this situation may have caused a big problem for my mother, who was a teacher in that same school. I don't know, but I just guess, because I was never told. I was kind of spared from this. But when I kind of recalled this story at home, my parents were shocked, and they said, no, that was wrong. You shouldn't have said that. So things like this happened. But
it's interesting from a parent's, because I guess neither of us were parents to young children in socialism, but just thinking about how scared I would be of, children say all sorts of things, and oh my God, what if my child says the wrong thing?
Yeah,
it must have been extremely tense for parents as well.
Yes, because this could cost my mom's job, for example. Luckily, it didn't. But my father, who once made a remark about Stalin being the same as Hitler, and he made this remark at his workplace, and he lost his job. And for quite a few years, he was banned from Budapest. He was not allowed to work in Budapest. By the time he had 2 young daughters. So things happened, and if you were lucky, you kind of you were spared. But these were difficult times.
Yeah. So when that happened with your father, or my granddad, I guess.
Yeah.
So can you so he wasn't allowed to work in Budapest.
No, he had to
travel every day.
Yeah, and he lived away. He wasn't allowed to live in Budapest and neither to work.
But you didn't go with him, so they
no. We stayed there, and he, as an economist with a degree, he had to work in a cow shed, and this is what his work was, and he got some kind of payment or salary for this. But because people do keep together, people look after each other. And my father always used to say that in those days, people were looking after each other even more than nowadays. So his old friends who knew that he was in trouble and he needed some kind of help. And what they did was they somehow got work for him that he was translating for someone in Budapest, doing the job for someone else. So he got a bit more money for that. But anyway, so he was banned from Budapest, and also my mom. Yeah.
Do you remember how often you saw him, or what that period was like?
I can't remember that period at all. Mm-hmm. I can't remember, and probably as a parent, as I know from when something bad happens, you try to spare your children from real trauma. So we may have been told, oh, well, that has to work away, but not the reason for why. But I'm sure that it was an extremely difficult time for my mother. But also how people kind of were looking out for each other, helped each other is another story. Is when mom got word that men's shoes, were on sale during that week in a particular shop. I don't know how she got the news, but she decided that she needed to buy a pair of shoes for dad. But in the shop, only the man who was there was allowed to actually buy shoes. So if she went to the shop and said, oh, well, I want a pair of men's shoes, she wouldn't be given one. So what she decided was she stopped someone in the street who she thought is like kind of the size of her husband, my father. And he asked this man, well, come with me to the shop because I need to buy a pair of shoes for my husband who can't be here. So this man agreed. They went both into the shop, and apparently the man's feet were smaller than dad's, the size that dad needed. But he said to the shop assistant, oh, it will be good, I will put on 2 socks, but that will be fine. And mom could buy this pair of shoes for dad. So, this sounds, looking back, well, not pathetic. It's really sad. But this is how it was. Or long queues when you heard that, oh, well, you can sometimes for bread even. Oh, that, bread is delivered, and then people were queuing in long lines and, waiting to get some.
The only similar situation I can think of is young people buying alcohol these days. They need to get someone in from the street to buy it.
Very oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But it's a bit different when it's shoes.
Yeah, very different reason. Yeah. But life was. Yeah, well, you have to live life. So everybody did the most what we could. But But yeah, it wasn't easy. But life is not easy for anybody. So yeah. But another thing, I mean, how teaching went, for example, when the Russians occupied Hungary, which we were not allowed to say, the word was liberated. Russians liberated Hungary. So again, you have to be very careful what kind of, how you describe the presence of Russians, of the Soviets in Hungary. So anyway, the directive was that everybody had to learn Russian. From the age of 10, you had to learn Russian. Now, in a country where Russian was never taught before, all of a sudden, in every school, for every class of, 10 years up, year 5 and upwards, teachers of Russian language were needed. So a lot of people who decided to kind of, join the flow, they started to learn Russian to teach the children Russian. But then it was said that these teachers were probably 1 or 2 lessons ahead of their pupils learning Russian because, nobody really.
Not enough people speak Russian.
No. And also that was an interesting thing that we had to learn Russian for 8 years in the upper primary school and secondary school. That was absolutely compulsory. But everybody kind of prided that, I can only ask for a glass of water, nothing else in Russian, because you wouldn't say you deliberately didn't really learn, but it wasn't something that you did very keenly. So even though my generation was learning Russian for many, many years, practically nobody can speak it because, maybe that was also kind of a protest.
Yeah.
Silent protest. Yeah.
So maybe just bringing religion into it, how was it being a Roman Catholic in this time?
Well, Hungary is a Catholic country, has always been. So it was quite a blow to the nation that religion was kind of banned in a way, or was declared, it's the opium of the people. So
I never knew this. Was it actually illegal, or what like
it wasn't illegal. It wasn't illegal, but you kept it to yourself that you were a religious person. And that was also something that I had to learn. I was told by my parents, don't talk about it. Don't talk about that. We go to church every Sunday. Now, because my mother was a teacher, and that was quite a dangerous thing, to be religious and be a teacher, because the idea was from the state that if you are religious, you are the enemy of the state. Mm-hmm. So, and especially to be a teacher who teaches the new generation, that sounded quite a conflict.
Which maybe you are actually, because it's very hard to reconcile religion and communism. So maybe you are an enemy.
Absolutely, yeah, true. So, but as I said, my parents were really, really kind of adamant or very strong. They had very strong beliefs on keeping, adhering to their own, traditional views, and among that was to keep faith and continue to practice religion. So what we had to do, we went to churches which were further away where we lived and where Mom's school was, or where the school was, where she worked, so that it was unlikely that someone would see her and then maybe report her to the headmaster. Mm-hmm. So we went to all sorts of different churches, a bit kind of away from the area where we live. But she, or they, both my parents, thought it very important to do that. Mm-hmm. And
I remember a story from her about when they got married, and they wanted a religious ceremony, but they had to hide the fact that they were going to do that. So I think they got dressed in a friend's apartment next to the church.
That's right. And also another kind of side to the story is that they decided to get married, but they waited till the last minute. Obviously, it couldn't be a big wedding in 51. They got married, meaning there were no means to kind of celebrate, but just being kind of make their vows in a church. So anyway, they decided to wait until, let's say, 2 days before their kind of date that they set, because at that time, what was happening in the country, those people, like my parents and their parents, who were the enemies of the state, what happened was they were people, well, I don't know the word in English, sorry. Anyway, let's say at 2:00 at night, a van arrived, stopped in front of a house, and there was a family who were taken away from Budapest. They had 2 hours to pack their stuff that they wanted and they could bring with themselves, and they were taken to a far away village as far as possible, usually to the east of the country, which was very poor, and they had to live there from then on for quite a few years. And all their possession, their flat, was taken away, was acquired by the state, and a communist was moved in there. So this is how they acquired flats for themselves, for high-ranking, not so high-ranking communists. So the fear, because of my grandfather's position in the past, my family was worried about that they could be evacuated, not because they wasn't safe, they were actually taken
removed.
away, taken out, removed from Budapest. So
did that family do anything? Do you know, or the communists wanted their flat and they took it? Or?
They were kind of not that kind of probably rich. They had been in position which was which served the old regime before the war of Hungary, and or they may have been spied on or reported on, and because that was another thing, in Budapest there are high-rise buildings, blocks of flats, and every block of flats had a janitor. Now the janitor who cleaned the staircase, who closed or locked the door at night, opened the door or unlocked the gate in the morning, and their task was to actually look out for who is doing what in that house, in that block of flats. So they were actually informers to the party. So, for example, I actually heard about someone whose family members emigrated to Germany, and they regularly sent letters, simple letters, to this family who remained in Budapest. And after a while, these people were taken by the secret police and interrogated, what were in those letters, whereas those letters had already been opened by secret service, or I don't know, secret police. So, it was. So you were kind of, again, someone that you had to build a good relationship with, the janitor, so that you always took presents for them, Christmas time, so that they would be kind to you and not report on you, whereas you were not doing anything. So,
because of course, if they might, maybe we assume that they're good intentions, but what if they're bad intentions and they just make something up?
Exactly. Yes, yeah. And I'm not saying that every janitor was bad or every janitor was a built-in kind of brick in the wall, so to say, but it was generally general knowledge that be careful, what kind of relationship you build up with your janitor. Yeah, have a good relationship so that you could be secure. Yeah, yeah. So this is, and going back to my parents' wedding day, this is what exactly happened. They decided, okay, it's safe to have the wedding. And I guess the church was open to kind of these last minute weddings, but it wasn't a last minute wedding. They knew about it, only the date was kind of set last minute. And you couldn't go into a church dressed up as a bride, because that would be absolutely obvious that you are having a church wedding, which was an absolute no-no, not for a teacher, not for someone who wanted to keep their job. So yeah, this is what happened, that a friend lived very near the church, and mom got dressed there, and very quietly they just sneaked into the church through the back door. There was the ceremony with a few people attending, and then out again. And also funny that a very good friend of dad and his bride, they had their wedding on the very same day, and mom's wedding dress, she took it off and gave it to her friend Marianne. She put it on because they didn't have money to buy wedding dresses, so that was one wedding dress, and that just was handed down to other people. Yeah, so people, yeah, everybody. Well, what was very, very important, that you had to survive. That was the main thing. You had to survive. Everybody hoped that this new regime, the socialist regime, is only temporary. So you have to stick it out. That was the idea. But in a way that you stay honest, you keep your integrity, you keep your faith, you provide for your family. So you, to a certain extent, you knew you had to abide by the rules set by the state, but you also knew where the limit was for you, where you had to stop, and maybe somehow pull out, somehow invent an excuse that you, for example, didn't want to attend a demonstration. When the cardinal died, who was again, he was imprisoned by the Soviets. Mindszenty, yes, when he died, and there was a demonstration to celebrate it. Somehow, I think that was, well, my memory is quite vague about it. And I know that my mom as a teacher was supposed to go to that demonstration, but she decided no, because that, she would lose your face or her face with that. She just felt she was not willing to do something which was absolutely against her belief. And so she invented that she had diarrhea. She couldn't leave the house, so she didn't go. So that was that was so how, and again, from my parents' view, how to raise children so that they would know how to behave in a way that you don't you don't give in to the state rules, but you still live life to the best of your abilities. And one thing was very much kind of pushed in our family, that you can succeed only through education. If you are educated, if you have got a good degree, and which is useful for the society, then you don't have to stand in the line of the party. If people, those who probably didn't sort of feel so strongly about keeping their integrity, and they aspired to a very high position, for example, they had to be party members. They had to actually get their little red book, and that opened the door for many, many people. But that was their choice.
It's interesting how you get put, just going back to the diarrhea lie for not going to the protest, but how you have to decide which morals are stronger, and which do you lie to not go to the protest, or do you go to the protest which is against your morals, but lying is against your morals, so you have to pick which morals you're breaking.
Absolutely. Yeah. What is your priority? So that's quite a dilemma, a moral dilemma for a person. Yeah. So
So
really, yeah.
So you just mentioned about the party and how you had to join the party to get anywhere. You mentioned before we started this about that someone did actually try to get you to tell on your friends and on your colleagues and get you into the party.
Yeah. That was when I was. Well, I'm a teacher, and interestingly, an English-Russian language teacher. I studied Russian because I just put it, in brackets. I had an extremely good teacher of Russian languages at secondary school, and because I love languages, and so this is how I chose Russian next to the English. Anyway, so I was a teacher in a secondary school in a small town outside Budapest, and one day I was approached by someone, a young man, who came and who said who wanted to talk to me. And this conversation was about he wanting me. He didn't really introduce himself, or he did, but I didn't understand where he really was, where he was from. The upshot was he wanted me to be an informer for the party about what was going on in the staff room. And we sat down, and when I realized what the conversation was about, I immediately knew absolutely no, which he probably realized. And then he started to tell me that, well, he actually chose me because he knows that I've traveled a lot. Yeah, because I sang in a choir, and with the choir we traveled to France, we traveled to Finland. And he said, oh, well, you are a kind of you know the world, you are a well-informed person. And then he started to say, well, yes, and I know when your father was banned from Budapest, and then I know that so he started to tell me things about my family members from the past, which was quite shocking, that he knew so much, and all kind of the bad things.
So there was definitely a threat.
Absolutely, yeah. But probably because this is what I learned from my parents, you don't give in. There's a limit how much you go along with this kind of following the rules. So
it's almost my first thought was it's almost like when the mafia go to speak to people, but it's that coercion where it's a polite threat that you should definitely join us, or you need to face the consequences.
Exactly. And then I thought to myself immediately, okay, I said no to him. Probably I won't get a passport for the next trip when the choir goes to a festival somewhere in Europe, because you had to apply for a passport to travel outside.
Every single time that you...
Well, every single time, and you as a tourist, you could travel only every third year to the West. If you traveled with a choir, that was different, but you had to apply for it, and they could have kind of divided. They didn't. I was quite surprised, actually, why they just like, probably I wasn't a big enough fish for them, so that's, I didn't really matter. But also the very interesting thing was, again, a way of kind of making you fearful. Before he left, he said, well, please don't tell your headmaster about our conversation. Don't tell anybody about this conversation. So he left, and then, I don't know, maybe it was naivety, I don't know, or maybe I just thought, well, I don't care. I knocked on the headmaster's door, and then I said to him, there was this man, this is what he wanted to do, this is what I told him. And then the headmaster, who was obviously a party member, and I'm sure he knew about this, or that this person would approach me. But he said, oh, well, that's very good that you told me about it. Well, don't worry. So, yeah.
It's interesting which way that was a test, whether it was testing you to see if you would say something, or whether you wouldn't, or what you would say, or
yeah.
I guess we'll never know what the test
we'll never know. Or were they testing the headmaster?
Yeah.
You never. So that this kind of this fearful secrecy
or paranoia.
Yeah. And this is what is really kind of still, this feeling never goes, because it's so much kind of ingrained, you know. Yeah. But also, I mean, this person was from the party, but because we were talking about religion, and I'm still a practicing Catholic, and this secondary school where I was teaching was in a small town, and there was one Catholic church, then there was one Protestant church. Anyway, so with kind of the experience from my childhood, I most of the time went to church somewhere in Budapest, whereas I already lived in that little town. But I didn't want to I wanted to go to church somewhere else so that it wouldn't be a problem for me as a teacher. But one day, there was no way I could travel anywhere, so I went to church in the local, or went for mass in the local church. And I was standing at the back because I just didn't want to be seen. But anyway, I did what I felt I needed to do and I wanted to do. And then a few days later, a colleague approaches me and she says, and she just pulled me aside. And she says, well, Eszter, I just would like to ask you, did you go to church because you wanted to see who was there? Or did you go because you are a churchgoer? And then I said, because I'm a churchgoer. So everybody was, because you could be spied on anywhere, and church was a very good place. So even the the average kind of person had fear of because then this colleague may have thought, well, maybe I was looking for how many children of my class, of my form, are at the church. So it wasn't, sometimes it wasn't very, very pleasant to live during that time.
But also, I think maybe it's changing now, but I definitely feel, so I've lived in the UK and in Hungary, and there's definitely seems to be still a suspicion or like a lack of trust between people in Hungary. And I'm sure that's the result of 40 years of this system, which just builds paranoia into people. And you just never know who you can trust and who you can't. And what ulterior motives they've got.
And that is a very dangerous side to communism or communist thinking, and the way they function. They build fear in you, but so that you would behave, you would you wouldn't kind of stand out or try to kind of do your own stuff. The idea was that it's like under an umbrella, you do the same all the time. And, this idea, everybody being equal. And then so it came, everybody is equal, but some people are more equal than others. The people who were more equal than others were members of the Communist Party or the leaders. So, there is no equality.
Something that's really fascinating to me is how the membership of the party almost becomes like a compliance thing, where you can assess whether someone is willing to go into the party, to be subservient to the party, and then you become kind of psychologically, you're already saying that you're subservient to the thing, which for me, there are some scary parallels in today's world of how you have to say certain things, and then people know that you're part of the group, and then you're compliant, and then you're acceptable, and then you can get ahead. If you don't say certain things, then you're held back, then you're not in the party, then you're someone else, you're less equal.
And also you can be kind of coerced to do things because you are the party member, so you are supposed to behave like this, or to do this, or to do that, or for example, to report on someone. So, and I remember my father saying at some point, never join a party never join a party. And he wasn't talking about the Communist Party, just general. Never join a party because you never can get out. So, yeah. Yeah, yes. And also kind of this, what is allowed to do, that there was also kind of a saying that you are free to do everything that is allowed to do. And that was, that was again something that kind of defines the communistic ideas, that, very strong-handed, and you do what you are told, you do what you are allowed. Yeah. But still, people found ways to ignore things, but you had to know what were the rules that you could break, and what was too much, and that would have jeopardized your livelihood, maybe, which obviously you didn't want.
Yeah, but then you can't, like, I guess as Grandad did, it's very difficult to keep up that guard for tens of years or 40 years, and then sometimes there might just be a slip of the tongue, and then you lose your job and you're banned from Budapest.
You pay for it, yeah, dearly, yeah.
Okay, so maybe moving along to more recent things. So you moved to the UK. I did with you.
Yes.
So when was that, and what was it like moving to the UK?
Well, we moved in '97, so it's now over 23 years ago. Not for political reasons at all. It was for job reasons.
Although Hungary wasn't even part of the EU at that time, so
it was
before that.
No, that was before that. That was before that. And well, to change countries when you are 40 years old is not easy. But this was our decision, so we did it. And we really kind of looked forward to it. And well, it's unfortunately, Britain has changed a lot. So 20 years ago, Britain was a very different country for many, many reasons. And during these 20 years, seeing all the changes, not for the better, here in Britain, is quite sad and in a way quite worrying. And one thing that is really striking and getting more and more striking, which kind of makes me kind of go back to my old sort of childhood years and when I lived in Hungary. Are you free to say anything that's on your mind? No. So 20 years ago in Britain, you didn't have to worry about voicing your opinion. By now, you have to be very, very careful what words you use. You better not use certain words because it can get you into trouble. And this is a worrying tendency in Britain, and this is probably good that you have got this Retalk platform, that people feel that there are platforms when you can say in a decent way, but you can voice your opinion without worrying that you would be marginalized by that, or
Not just that, you can definitely lose your job now for saying the wrong thing. It's completely
absolutely
normal.
Yeah, or you have to give in your notice, or yeah.
Maybe you don't have to go and work in a cowshed yet, but maybe that's coming in the future.
No, but the tendency is worrying. Yes, yeah. And the other thing which again feels similar to the kind of the communist views and the socialist views, and what is happening here now is that, and that actually started soon after we arrived here, that everything is everything is taken over by the government. The government is responsible. The government will tell you the government will organize for you, or in a wider sense, like in the old days in communism, you had to do how the government set the rules and the directives. And here, um, step by step, the individual's initiative is being taken away.
And responsibility.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I remember when you and your sisters went to school, and on primary school, and on the wall there was a big poster about your rights, as a child, as a pupil. There wasn't another poster about your responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So your right is very much kind of emphasized, but that everybody has got responsibility as well. That's now, this really nicely kind of matches the government's idea that the government is responsible. You just do what you are told. And unfortunately, if someone has got some kind of initiative as a kind of an individual, there are all sorts of blocks like health and safety or other regulations, or being afraid that you would be sued if you do this, if you do that, or if you say this thing. So somehow, again, you are, well, I couldn't say oppressed because that's too much to say, but you don't feel you have got, and that makes people not want to do anything. They start to expect the government to solve every problem, whereas that's not right. As an individual, we all have responsibilities, and we should all have the ability to kind of direct our lives and our actions.
Yeah, and this year definitely hasn't helped with COVID.
No. Well, COVID is a completely, that's kind of an added big difficulty.
It hasn't decreased the government's sort of making rules and taking over responsibilities.
No, I wasn't thinking about, but you are right. Yeah. Actually, yes, you just do as you are told, and then again, you sometimes reconsider the government's regulations, and then you think, well, if I'm immunized twice, I'm immune. Why can't I meet up with another couple who are also immunized twice? They had the So, Anyway, I'm just saying this because this is a type of thing which I find, this is a rule I can step over, I can break, because I'm just using my common sense, and that's also something which I very often kind of see, that common sense is lost, or people are fearful to use their common sense because someone from up, will tell, no, we are not allowed to do that.
I really wonder if is it a cultural thing, or is it the fact that you did grow up in a situation where it was clear that some rules can be broken, others can't, whereas maybe a lot of people, especially in the UK, breaking rules seems like a bad thing, whereas your childhood experience is that some rules can be broken. But maybe it's a Hungarian thing.
Well, I don't know. Maybe the two together. Maybe being a Hungarian, I don't know, but definitely having the childhood experience. And I used to work. I'm a person-centered counselor, already retired. But when I worked at the university, and that's also a big kind of a change for the worse in a way that I experience or have experienced here in this country, that management takes over. So it's not the professional who has got the kind of the say of, like, for us, how to work with a client, but we were kind of restricted by the rules which came from management, who were not professionally trained. They were managers, so they didn't really know what was necessary for a student, or in what way the counseling help would help, or service would help them. And at one team meeting, because I just said, well, I know we are not supposed to offer more than 7 sessions to a student, but I don't care, because if I think that a student needs more, I will somehow, I don't know, start another 7-session batch and things like that. And I don't care what the rules are in a way. And then a colleague said to me, well, are you behaving like this, or because you lived in a different country under a different regime that you break the rules? And then I said, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. But this is what you have to know. You have to know. And also, I mean, this example is when I was convinced what was in my client's best interest, I did everything for that, even being in conflict with management, because I believed, if I want to help someone, then I have to know when and how to break rules.
And you're the one who's closer to it, so you're the one who needs to make the situational decision.
Yeah. I think this example actually makes me remind, that in a way my thinking was, I'm in the counseling room with my client. I know, well, too big-headed to say, but I have a sense what is best for my client. So in a way, I close the door. I work with my client. I don't care about management. And that kind of reminds me of my mother, who was a teacher, primary school teacher. And actually she said this, that, when I close the door of the classroom, I'm in charge. I teach the children the way I see it best. And there is a very interesting story about that. That my mom taught her class that when you sing the national anthem, you stand up.
The Hungarian one.
In Hungary, the Hungarian.
Not the Soviet one.
No, of course, no, the Hungarian. Well, you are right. Yeah. Because we had to sing the social anthem as well. But when you hear the Hungarian anthem, you stand up. And so her class, the children, knew that. And as it happens, in her class was a child whose father was a high-ranking army officer. And one day this army officer comes to mom. That was a parent evening, or I think not all the parents together, but parents could actually talk to the teacher privately. That's a parent evening, yeah. And he said to my mom, I came to thank you. And mom says, yes. And he says that, at New Year's Eve, we were together with friends. And at midnight, this is a custom actually, that at midnight, the Hungarian national anthem is sung. And the national anthem comes on, and my son stands upright, and tells everybody, stand up, because my teacher told us and taught us that this is what you do.
Yeah, I think at this point, Grandma probably had a meltdown of, oh my God, what's going to happen to me?
I can imagine. But because this officer said, I want to thank you, he again repeated, I want to thank you for this. So, and that makes you wonder, what was that army officer like? Who was he as a person? Did he just join the army and, going up the ladder because that was convenient for him? But deep down, he didn't agree with the socialist and communist views. You would never know. You will never know. But that's again an example how many people could keep their integrity and how you felt good about not giving in to the pressure of coming from the state. Yeah.
I think that's a good place to wrap up. That was a lot of stories, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter, and thank you for inviting me. And I wish you good luck with Retalk. and with everything in life.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Thank you.